All right, fill your wine glass because you're in for a amazing talk tonight. Welcome to Davos Lodge. This is our evening entertainment. I'm Rhett Power. I am a writer with Forbes and Rolling Stone, and also an author. Um, not, I have not written anything quite as humorous as this.
You don't know yet.
I can guess. But anyway, so Thierry, you have an amazing history. You ran the World Economic Summit and the program side of that for a long time. You actually wrote a book with Klaus Schwab called The Great Reset, which was well received, I hear.
Too well received, yes. It was a great
That was
success.
your first thriller, by the way. Apparently,
It could be. It could be. The idea was to write an essay about the consequences of COVID for the macro world, as seen from a economic, environmental, societal, tech, geopolitical lens. And it ended up being a thriller because the book was a tremendous success. It sold more than 1 million copies worldwide, translated into 30 languages. But it succeeded because it got embroiled in the crazy conspiracy
here
theories.
QAnon really loved you.
QAnon and MAGA, and which said that the WEF was the originator of COVID in collaboration with Bill Gates, Prince Charles, several distinguished guests of the World Economic Forum in Davos, and that the idea of COVID was to develop a vaccine, which Gates subsequently did, which contained nanoparticles that would take control of your brain so that the global elite could take control of the entire world and the entire population, 8 billion population. And so that made it a very miserable story in the end, because the book core idea was that the world needed to become more respectful of the nature. That was argument number one. And the second argument was that it should be more inclusive, because there were two big social inequalities. And it ended up being this crazy conspiracy about the global elites dominating the world, which is what the WEF does every day, as we know.
Well, I'd call that a success because all publicity is good publicity as an author, right?
Well, sort of. Not always.
No? Okay. So this is a thriller. This is 2.0. Last year you launched the Deaths at Davos 1.0, I guess.
Yes.
So this is a sequel. Talk about, why did you write this? And
why not?
Well,
why not?
Expand.
Well, I must start by saying that this is my sixth thriller. I write novels. I write essays as well, but I think thriller is much more fun. Novels are more fun because for two reasons. First, novels are by definition the meta-discipline by excellence. When you write a novel, you talk about everything else: economics, society, morality, life, geopolitics, biology, everything. So in a novel contains every single discipline you can think of. And the other argument for writing a novel is that when you write a novel, you are just bound by one thing, which is the power of your own imagination. So you can go anywhere you want and nobody's going to blame you for that, contrary to an essay or an academic book. And there is a third reason, which is that as human beings, we have an innate appetite for solving whodunits. Who is behind it? Who did that? Why? That are the questions we ask ourselves all the time. Why Davos? Who is behind it? Who does real stuff at Davos? Is there something that's happening behind the scenes? Maybe yes, maybe not. So that's one of the dimensions I wanted to explore in the book. By writing a novel, it could have been a journalistic article.
Well, we're going to get into the underside of Davos because that's a big part of that book. And we're going to get into the new great game, which is the rivalry between Russia and U.S. and and Europe in the middle. And I also think there's a little bit of stuff about intelligence and all the intrigue that goes, sort of that's
Yes.
woven in through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So we're going to get into that, but I think, did you want to come up? We're going to have some dramatic. We're going to read a couple dramatic passages to.
I must say that we wrote it à quatre mains, as you say in French. Marine is my wife, and it's collaborative. It was not an effort; it's a collaboration.
This wasn't planned, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to...
No, I don't think you need a mic. Do we need a mic?
It's probably good. Yeah, it's recording. So.
I'm just going to start the book for you, and then perhaps we'll dip back into one or two other little bits, because I got no warning. But Saturday, the 18th of January, 2025. Sometimes reality trumps imagination. Sometimes it even outruns fiction. Such was the thought doing the rounds of Olena Kosterenko's mind as she sat on the terrace of the Hotel Schloutz Alp, soaking up the welcome warmth of the winter sun. With more than a soupçon of understatement, the last 12 months hadn't been easy. In the intervening years, since last in Davos, Olena had seen the hopes she'd harboured so fervently evaporate, one by one. Ukraine, her country, was still at war, fatigued and fracturing within, while fast falling from the top of the international community's list of priorities. So too were the environmental policies to which she devoted so much time and energy in recent years. And now, in just 2 days' time, Donald Trump would take up residence in the White House. Mission accomplished for 0047. On offer, new beginnings. And yet Olena was determinedly looking forward to the next few days, excited and apprehensive in equal measure. Her mission was far from accomplished. On offer, change for the better or abject failure. Is that enough?
It's very good. Yeah.
Call on me again if you want.
Oh yeah, keep going.
Shall I keep going?
Tease us.
Okay. Leaning back on the wicker lounger, Olena stared out at the horizon as she put her well-thumbed copy of The Magic Mountain down on the small side table. In 1913, the idea for the novel had come to Thomas Mann on this very same terrace. He then spent nearly 12 long years working on it until its publication in November 1924. Mann's chef-d'oeuvre was to prove prescient. It read the omens and warned of the dangerous times ahead. The Europe to come of the 1930s would be torn between apathy and despair, grappling with conflicting ideologies in a fragmented and disorderly world. How could it have come to this? Isn't today's world in a similarly dangerous place? Pondered Olena. What had Thomas Mann seen from this terrace that others had failed to observe? For a little while, still gazing out at the mountains, her musings continued before she reluctantly concluded that as most looked on, incredulous and incrementally unshockable, reality was outstripping the wildest of imaginations and making little sense as it did so.
You gotta read the line. You gotta read the one line about the lines at Davos.
I will do that later. Because it's important to state that this is a fictional Davos. It's a work of fiction. It's not the World Economic Forum. It's called the Circle annual meeting, and it's really important to us because it allows us to go beyond the boundaries of what would be permissible if we're talking about the World Economic Forum in Davos, but it takes place in the very same place at the very same dates.
Can I ask a question? Did you write this in English, being a French native speaker?
Yes, but we wrote it together, and my wife is English.
So talk about the underside of Davos that you describe in the book, and that happens during the circle.
Yes. So there is the reality of what's happening in the world, and we start with this description of what prompted Thomas Mann to write The Magic Mountain, and it took place in on the terrace of the Chatsat Hotel, which was then a sanatorium. And for those of us who've read The Magic Mountain, have many of you read the book? Yes. It's amazing. It took him 12 years to write it. He spent 3 of these years in the sanatorium with patients. And he started writing the book while not being sure of his own ideologies and convictions. And as the book matured, he became fundamentally anti-nationalist and took position against the emergence of Nazism in Germany. Had to escape. Went to the US. So in many respects, one could claim that, like Zweig, Stephen Zweig, and others, he saw it coming, which was remarkable. So the idea is, why is it that Thomas Mann saw the writing on the wall of what would engulf Europe in the 30s and 40s? And last year, so the first book, this is a sequel, we had the same questioning, feeling that it could be that in the US, Trump is going to change everything, not only for the US, but also for the rest of the world, because this is the most consequential election that one could think of. It's going to impact everybody, everywhere. And we already see it. So last year, the plot was about a grouping of Western decision makers that were determined to do everything they could to prevent the election of President Trump. And I'm not going to reveal more than that, because otherwise I would tell you about the plot. This year, it's different. It's a covert operation that takes place during Davos itself to lead an operation against Russia before it's too late, before Trump is nominated. That was yesterday. And the changes happening in the US administration prevent the CIA to do the job it wanted to do. So it's all about red lines and where the Russians are capable of going and what the Western world, shrinking Western world, can do to prevent that. So that's the plot, and it takes place against the background of these circles and all meeting, because so many people have a wrong impression of what Davos is all about. We think that Davos is a center of global power. It's a gathering of the elites. And of course, all the people who come to Davos are members of the global elite because they are rich, they are super educated, they are in a position of power. But no decision has ever been made in Davos that was a consequential decision. People come to Davos to do business, to do their own stuff, their businesses. And why would they come to improve the state of the world or change the world for the better? No, they come to do what they have to do. So that's the backdrop of what's happening in this year's novel. And it's trying to dispel many illusions that we can have when you read the press or report about Davos, about what it is. In reality, it is a gigantic, highly successful trade fair and nothing else.
Well, we were having a conversation before we came on about how transactional it has become, and I mean, you talk about that in the book, and it's I think you're right. I think that's exactly. I think you've nailed it. Talk about a little more of the intrigue between Russia and the United States, and then Europe being in the middle. Talk about that dynamic and how that's really shaped the conversations and shaped the outcomes here, and how you sort of frame it in the book.
Yes. So I'm going to try to talk about it without revealing the plot, because otherwise it will remove the incentive for you to read the book. But what is very striking about Davos is that you have this incredible concentration of power. You have 3,000 participants, all very highly powered people, head of state, prime ministers, global CEOs, trillion of dollars or euros, or pounds or whatever yen of global capital. You have 20,000 more people coming to Davos to do business on the margin of the Davos meeting itself. So there is this incredible concentration in a very small country, in a very small, narrow valley. And being in a very narrow valley could make sense 50 years ago, because when you're in such a place like in Stade or other places in Switzerland, you are in a very secluded environment and you feel safe. Well, in today's world, it's a fiction, of course. You can't feel safe anywhere. So it's quite incredible to think that you have this tremendous concentration of wealth and power in a place without having many interested parties willing to disrupt it, maybe. And we never talk about it because, of course, none of us can know what it is, with some exceptions, maybe, for those of you who are in defense or intelligence services or whatever. But you know, intelligence, the definition of intelligence, that if you know about it, it's not intelligence anymore. So the questioning, the fiction, evolves around this notion that a lot is happening behind the scenes. And the book starts with the Russians willing to cross some red lines in Davos, because we know that Russians are crossing red lines all over Europe at the moment. You know, we talk about the war in Ukraine, which is a hot war, but there is a war happening in Europe, and every day you have incidents that could become dramatic accidents being instigated by the Russian intelligence services, planes, the cables. You know, the cables. Now we know about the cables. Right. In the Baltic Sea, and airplanes. We know about the weather. The Russians were planning to disrupt some logistical operations by exploding airplanes in the air. So all this has been now made public in the press, and we know about them. So in the book we go a bit further and trying to imagine what could it be that the Russians do in Davos to breach these red lines. But luckily, we have a great heroine in the book, Olena Kostarenko, who is a Ukrainian, who happens to do more than what she's supposed to do in Davos. And so we have counter-operations at the core plot, trying to imagine what you could do in Davos to prevent the Russians not to do in Davos what they are wanting to do. And you are doing everything you can to prevent them to do so by engaging in covert operations while the annual meeting of the circle takes place.
You guys want to hear a little bit more?
This is in response to your, this I hope perhaps is familiar to some of you, the days that you spend up here. Tuesday the 21st of January 2025, it's today. That morning the Congress Center teemed like an anthill, with colonies of white badges busy scurrying in and out. Debate, plenary sessions, studded with big names, always oversubscribed, never the source of any scoops. But who cared? The lure of sharing space with a head of state or a billionaire outweighed anything else. Reasons differed, curiosity or vanity, plus the ever-present possibility of a serendipitous encounter with one of the good and the great present in the room. That was the participants' dilemma, how to decide between their incessant business meetings and the temptation to take part in a big plenary. This explained the perpetual motion of the white-badged termites running to and from the Congress Center into town and back. So many meetings, so little time, was the curse of all Davos participants. It was 8:30 a.m., and there was a 10-minute queue at the security, well beyond the average tolerance threshold of the very far from average global movers and shakers who found themselves obliged to stand in it. Olena had just left her backpack at the cloakroom and deposited her belongings in the tray of the X-ray machine. This is such a balls-up, muttered the greying middle-aged man who was standing behind her. This year I'm an industry partner, just coughed up 300 Swissies, 300,000 Swissies for the privilege, and I'm still standing in a queue like a moron. I had to cut short my breakfast with an important client, and now I'm going to miss the beginning of President Mallet's keynote. That guy's got cojones. He speaks my language, and I want to hear every word he's got to say. Sweetheart, you wouldn't mind if I just slipped past, would you? I would actually, said Olena. I'm in a hurry too. We must admire the circle for promoting democracy within its ranks. Whoever we are, we cue the same. I'm not allowed to say the rude word. Bollocks. I know there is a super VIP entrance on the other side of the Congress Center for the heads of state and other VVIPs. Price tag, 600,000 to 800,000.
Well, the point you just made about transactionality, not the circle of the book, but the World Economic Forum has become a hugely transactional organization, very successful. They have to be admired for that. You maybe saw the figures today because they've been made public by Semaphore, the Financial Times, and others. The revenues so far for 2024, not so far. The revenues, I think, for 2024 are raised very fast, so I may be wrong, but I think we're in excess of 450 million Swiss francs. It's
Wow.
remarkable. It's remarkable,
Wow.
and it's a testimony to the potency of the nothing economy, because it's not production. You don't produce a good, a physical good. You produce an idea, a fiction. It's not even a service. You produce a platform. You offer a platform.
But you have to.
Everybody wants to be on it. Like
Right, I thought-
tonight, and they make 450 billion, half a billion euros.
And I
Which
think
is
that's.
remarkable.
I mean, it goes to the conversation we were having earlier. But you know, I got a lot of heat for coming, from my social following, and as I was saying, but I have to be here because of those transactions, and I have to be here to do the business that I do, and I have to be here to learn, because this is where the conversations are happening, what is coming and what to expect and what I need to advise my clients on. So I mean, that's what it's become, and it's become a necessity for a lot of people.
I don't know whether it's a necessity, but if you want to do big business, yes, you have to come to Davos or to Milken Institute or to all these hugely successful platforms that provide a place for physical encounters. And it makes sense because one could develop the idea that the more digital we become, the greater the appetite for meeting in person, because that's how you do business. That's how you generate deals. You need to talk to people. You can do it in the ether via Instagram or emails or whatever. So it's a fantastic idea, and hats off to Klaus Schwab for creating such a hugely successful platform.
So next year will the plot be the new leadership of WEF? For next year's edition?
No, because maybe it would be bad taste to do that. But one of the points that we develop in the book is that we should abandon this fallacy that the World Economic Forum is about improving the state of the world. No, it's about to do big business, which it does incredibly successfully. But the forum, by its very nature, can only be the sounding box of what's happening in the greater world. And you can see it with Trump. Trump is not super sympathetic to most of the ideas that the World Economic Forum developed over the past 40 years. And now the forum is a proof that everybody's embracing Donald Trump. Everybody is bending the knee to Donald Trump. Every CEO in Davos is excited that Donald Trump is at the helm, or pretty much everybody, or those who are not pleased don't say so. And that's what the forum is all about. It's a
And
sounding
Musk
box.
arrived this evening.
And Musk is in town now to.
And I won't say what I want to say about that, but hey, based on what he did yesterday. All right, so questions. You guys have questions? Yeah?
No, I live in Palm Beach.
You live in Palm Beach, so you're a friend of Donald Trump, your neighbor.
This is my first forum, and I'm curious about whether you see
if you write fiction, yes, of course, you can imagine all sorts of plausible futures, and it's going to change dramatically. It's already changing. We are going to, to live in the jungle over the next few years, and God knows what's going to happen. I mean, the world is a very frightening place. And when I was at the WEF, I created the Global Risk Network, which publishes a report every year, the week before Davos, about how global CEOs see the risk landscape. And this year is not a happy reading. I don't know whether you had the opportunity to look at it. So there are 5 macro risk categories: economics, the environment, geopolitics, society, and tech. Every single one of them is evolving in the wrong direction. And what is tremendously worrying and consequential is that this risk cannot be considered in isolation. They conflate with each other, they exacerbate each other, so they become bigger in the process of doing so. And what the report makes very, very clear, which has been known, by the way, for 15 years, is that the environment is the mother of all crises, and environmental risks are going to generate monumental cascading risks for geopolitics, economic, society, etc. And we've been thinking about this for 15 years. And what pains me is that in 2002, my boss was a gentleman called José María Figueres at the World Economic Forum. He was a former president of Costa Rica, and he said, "This year, let's make climate change one of the biggest issues of Davos in the program." And the evidence was already very clear that carbon emissions were going to lead to runaway global warming, climate catastrophes. We had 2 partners for the work at that time, Swiss Re and Zurich Insurance, who knew what the numbers, being insurance companies, so they knew about the risks and could measure the risks financially. And the pushback from the partners of the World Economic Forum, oil and gas company, was such that in the end, all this phenomenal content was diluted. So that the proof in the pudding, corporate interest can take hostage the most noble ideas, lofty ideas, and they prevail, as we can see at the WEF today.
Anybody else?
Is there are stories that, like your novel, happened behind the nose of the people that when they were gathering here, and it was stories that happened, this kind of mysterious and spy.
Plenty. Well, spy, I don't know. There is a bit of sex in the book. There is a lot of. Yes, of course. Well, there is a lot of happening behind the scenes, and about 7 years ago, there was an op-ed published in the New York Times in which Musk said, Elon Musk, "I will never come because it's boring." And yesterday, the former head of communication of the WEF, Adrian Monk, was quoted in an article, I think in Axios or Semaphore, saying, absolutely not. He always wanted to come and was pathetic, was begging for an invitation, which he never got. And then he became famous, and that was another matter. But in this op-ed, absolutely, in this op-ed, the journalists were interviewing a number of participants who said, absolutely not, it's not boring at all. There is a lot of stuff happening. People get drunk. When after 9 o'clock in the evening, yes, many participants get drunk. You have hundreds of escort girls and boys coming from Zurich, from Geneva, from Paris, from London.
I noticed Psychedelic House wasn't back after 2 years ago.
Absolutely. So there is a lot of interesting, amusing, intriguing stuff happening behind the scenes.
So what is your next, what do you think after this novel? Are you going to write any fiction story? Are you thinking?
Of course, because we try to be as realistic as possible. And the reason why it's published on Amazon is that we finished the book a week ago. And Amazon allows you to go you know, on the platform almost overnight. It takes 18 hours. So we try to stick to what's happening in the world. And we will, because there'll be so much to talk about in a year from now. So much would have happened in this intervening 12 months. No, it won't be boring for sure. It won't be happy for almost surely, but it won't be boring. And a lot of stuff will take place and will surprise us.
Due to your barometer, you are taking out, you are predicted big events. Would you like to take a risk and give us something that you think will be the 25 big events?
The barometer doesn't try to predict. We try to think about plausible futures and help. A risk which I think is almost certain to happen is that there'll be more inflation. More inflation. Inflation is fundamental to our lives. It played. But
not the stuff of now.
It can be the stuff of. It certainly contributed to bring Trump to power. So inflation is so important to everybody's lives, and the less wealthy you are, the more inflation matters. Nobody knows. Probably not even Trump himself knows what's going to happen in terms of the policies he tried to implement. And yesterday we were at a fantastic dinner organized by Bill Browder, the activist financial investor.
I had lunch with him today. He's scared.
And Bill was making a very obvious point but none of us thinks about this. We think about what Trump is going to do, but do we think about how Putin, Xi Jinping, the presidents of Korea, in Iran, people in all over the world are going to react to what Trump does. So it's going to be a cascade of very non-anticipable events that will take us by complete surprise. We are going to live in a world of black swans, in a perpetual motion, most likely.
Can I ask a different question? How long did it take you to write this book?
Very short. 8 weeks.
Yeah,
2 months. Yeah. Because yes, sir.
Yeah. What can you collaborated very close to Schwab, right? What kind of person is he inside of the person?
What kind of person? Well, first of all, he's remarkable because he's 86 and has the mind and the body of someone who is 20, 30 years younger. He's incredibly curious and agile intellectually. He's very interested to explore multiple dimensions. So it was a great collaboration. I enjoyed working with him, writing the books with him, also because he has unrivaled access. He's probably the only person in the world who has no role of any kind. He has no role, no formal role.
No
He doesn't make
defined
decisions.
position.
He doesn't make decisions. He's not and yet he can pick up his phone and talk to anybody in the world, pretty much. So he's got this incredible access to all sorts of people, decision makers, CEOs, intellectuals, artists.
Obey to someone.
To his constituents, to his members. To his wife, yes. To his wife, Hilda. I don't know. No.
He loved his grandchildren.
I don't know about his personal life. He has 2 children who are colleagues who worked at the World Economic Forum. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Who wouldn't love his grandchildren?
I'd like to know more about what is your personal and Malleret plan for 2025. Not only the writing, we'd like to know more about your parallel actions.
You have a conference too.
Yes, we do, but our personal lives are of no interest to anybody. I can assure you that. No, parallel. Well, you know what we do? I think we are going to sail extremely turbulent seas. It's going to be tough for everybody at different levels, of course. In our case, we find great solace in nature. We live in Chamonix. We love the mountains. And the point we've been trying to make in the Summit of Minds, which is the event that we both run, was to emphasize the idea that nature is absolutely essential to us. Natural capital, of course, economically is absolutely vital. And also in terms of our own personal well-being. You know, you cannot be well mentally and physically and psychologically and cognitively unless you have a strong relation with nature. Nature is soothing. It's so vital to us all. So that's how we
And we even wrote a book about that too.
and we wrote a book about that called 10 Good Reasons
10
to Go
Good
for a Walk.
Reasons to Go for a Walk, which was published in French and it was published in 2017, and it's on its 5th print run in France, and it's going to be a pocket edition this year. It's also available in English. It was self-published in English, and a lot of what we said has been resaid, but it's very extraordinary how post the pandemic, post-confinement, there's still an enormous relevance to this book that is now 6 years old. So we're probably going to have another look at it, because the message is really important. It's about how there are simple solutions, accessible solutions to some of the most complex problems. Health, our appreciation of our environment. Of course, that's not going to solve the problems, but it could actually perhaps get people to vote for the right leaders who share that value. But if their appreciation isn't there, maybe this is a parallel project for 2025 to rekindle some sensible, realistic optimism through small actions. And that small action can actually just be being putting on a pair of walking boots and not sit in a queue of limousines in a street where there's a perfectly reasonable pavement. And why does it matter that a head of state or a CEO, why aren't they walking on the pavements?
Very simple.
Security.
No, there is no danger in those streets. So that's, I'm not throwing any stones. It's just an illustration of how simple messages, if they are conveyed correctly, don't turn into populism.
Your point about security, so if I may add something, one of my greatest recollections was when Clinton came. I was head of the program in Davos. It was in 2003 or 4, and I was absolutely amazed by Clinton himself because first of all he walked. You know, the car was following, but he walked on the promenade and he talked to everybody. And he'd arrived at 3 in the morning from Amman. I remember he was in Jordan, and he had a very full day. And it was already midnight or 1 a.m., so he hadn't slept for 20 hours. And he was walking back with Klaus Schwab, and I was behind in the Congress Center. And there were the ladies cleaning the Congress Center. And one of them said, "Oh, President Clinton," and they said, "Let's make a photo." And Klaus Schwab said, "President," and there was the bodyguards, and he stopped and chatted for 20 minutes with his ladies, making pictures, asking them about their lives. And I find it remarkable. But the point about Clinton was that he walked, and so did Shimon Peres. You know, Shimon Peres walked along the promenade. So living in these secluded armored cars, and it's not for everybody, and it's not an absolute necessity.
I think Clinton needed he got energy from the people.
Yeah, but
Don't-
you had
don't
nothing
we
to
all?
gain from
Don't we
the
all?
ladies.
No,
No, who didn't even speak
but I don't
English.
think. But I don't think that's not who he was. I mean, he was. That's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine. Him
I
doing
just
that.
find it,
Yeah.
remarkable.
I can imagine him doing that. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Oh, hold on. Get a copy of the book. Can you get it on Amazon?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's only on Amazon at the moment because